Hey everyone, today's video is a continuation of last videos. Last video we learned how to create a database, the tables, and how to insert data. Today we will be learning how to fetch the data from the database and structure it via structs. We will be using Golang. If you have not watched the previous video, be sure to check that out. But before we will get into the code, I will first explain to you guys via some animations how the data will be extracted. Okay, so currently this is how our database looks like. We have a users table and a posts table. Let's suppose if I want to grab the data from the users table. To do so, I will make a simple SQL query that will select the rows from the table. So at this point, the data will look something like this. However, after that, I will need to scan every single row. And what I will do is I will map every row with a username and a variable, because the rows only has two values, username and variable. After that, what I will do is I will insert the values into a struct. Now, let's get into the code. Okay, now, before we start coding, the first thing we're going to want to do is create a struct. So your struct needs to have every single value inside of your database. For an example, my database table called users has two values, a username and a password, both of whom are strings. So let's create a struct called user data and have two variables called username and password, which are a string. It will look something like this. Okay, the next thing we will be wanting to do is run our SQL query. So let's create a new variable called rows, and we will use the same error variable as used earlier. The next thing we're going to do is use the colon equal to and make a SQL query. So SQL.query, and we'll be going select the data. So whenever we want to select everything, we will just use the asterisks or asterisks. I don't know what it's called, from users. Okay. Oh, I know. We're going to use db.query. This is because first the SQL.open is used to connect to the MySQL, but then in order to do further actions, we will have to use db.query. All right. After that, we will simply use the same if error is unequal to nil, then we will have to panic it. We're just doing this just to make sure, just for the sake of debugging, and if there are any errors. The next thing we're going to want to do is store our data inside of two variables and then later on append it to the structs. So let's first create our variables and our instance of the user data struct. So to create variables, we will just use var username string and var password string. The next thing we're going to do is create our instance of the struct, which is simply, we will call it data. So var data, and it's going to be multiple, so we will have to use the square brackets, user data. Okay? Now we will start to scan the rows. So we will go for rows.next, error is equal to, and we will scan every single row. All right? So we will go rows.scan, and when we take the scan data, we will create two pointers to the username and the password. We're using pointers because it's much faster. Also because it's the most efficient method because because when you constantly change the values of variables, it could lead to some accidental repetitions. This way, we know that the data is constantly being properly rewritten. The next thing we're going to want to do is just check for some more errors. So if error is unequal to nil, then simply panic error. Okay. The next thing we're going to want to do is append it to the data struct that we instantiated prior. So data is equal to append, and we're going to append the already existing data. Okay. Though basically what happens is that each time we append, we create a new variable data, and we're going to add in the previous data, like the previous variable data. And then we're going to want to do is we're going to add a new struct. So it's going to be the name of our struct, which is user data, and for the username portion, we will simply just call it the variable username. It'll be username and colon username. Okay, and then for a password, we will go password. Okay, the next thing we'll do is just print out everything we have done so far. Print out our data, and we are going to also want to close down our database, db.close. Okay, now let's just run the so. Go run grab data.go. So yeah, as you can see, we have gotten the values of Bruce Wayne, which is the name, and then the password, which is Batman. And we got Clark Kent, which is the username, and Superman, which is the password. Now let's suppose if we want to just get the specific data, we can just simply index it using the index method. So if I were to run this again, we only get Bruce Wayne. Now let's suppose if we want to get just the username, right? So we can go data, and then we can just go dot username. And boom, now we just get Bruce Wayne. So, just for a recap of everything we've done, we first created a struct called user data. We then connected to our MySQL database. We then executed the query to grab the data from the users. The next thing we did was scan the data. And what we did was we transferred it to the variables we created. After that, what we did was we simply appended it to the the user data instance, which is a variable, which variable is called data. And then afterwards, we just printed out data, and then we can index it and also see certain values. Okay, I hope this video was clear to you guys. And if you guys have any questions, please leave them in the description. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.